everyone to the Shock Absorber podcast. Wonderful to have you along with us. My name is Joel, if you don't know my name. And sitting on the couch right next to me is Tim. Hello, Tim.
Hello, Joel.
How are you?
I'm very well.
As I said last week, hair is looking magnificent. You got a haircut from last week?
You got a haircut from last week, yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
You were able to take a pause from your emails and get it done.
That's right. Yes. Yeah, took a break.
Excellent. Yep. And Fee, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks.
You're making this more of a regular thing, which is lovely.
It's nice to be around.
Yeah, definitely. Have you had a haircut recently like Tim? Or that doesn't sound like it is.
I don't know. You can tell my fringe is the giveaway.
Oh,
see,
okay.
Like, once I get
your eyelashes are touching your fringe.
Yeah, that's right. Once it gets to, when it's eyebrows, it's fine. When it's eyelashes, it probably needs a trim. So
right.
That's my haircut.
So it's almost time for a trim. Is that what you're saying?
Probably. Yeah.
Okay. Tim, your friend Greg,
yes,
sent you a Twitch Jesus.
Yeah. Shout out to Greg. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. He emailed it to me as well.
Yeah.
It was very kind. Thank you for listening and for participating. It's a 24-hour AI bot Jesus.
Yes.
Is that how you would describe it?
I don't know. I honestly don't know how to describe this, but
we've got him running in the background.
I'm letting you,
right
as
now.
the younger generation, Joel, explain this to me because I'm so confused.
What is he wearing?
It's like a smock.
It's like a monk's habit or something.
Yeah, some sort of Catholic monk or yeah.
I mean, I'm used to the whole like Jesus with the sash. Where does that come from? You know, it's in kids ministry, like the cartoony Jesus has always got the sash.
I'm not sure. Is that historically accurate?
I'm assuming not. Oh. That's why I'm wondering where it came from. Anyway, they haven't gone down that route.
No,
which would be like I would look at that and I wouldn't even blink because I've seen it so many times, even though I have no idea where it came from.
I'm just looking up The Chosen because they've done a lot of work on being historic.
Sash. Oh, there's a sash.
Oh, he's got a sash in one of the pictures.
Oh, is it maybe some sort of shawl, like
maybe a teaching
Jewish
shawl?
prayer shawl or teaching shawl or something like that?
Wow.
If you want to correct our historical depictions of Jesus, you can email Joel at shockabsorber.com.au.
The ones in the kids' ones always look like it's sort of like a satiny thing. It always reminds me of when people graduate and they have the satiny bits on the robe.
Oh right, yeah, that's better than what I was thinking of, like the winning sash of like Miss World.
Oh gosh,
World kind of.
You could go there. Jesus wins.
Yeah, Jesus wins.
Best human.
Anything to kids, but
Jesus has won.
Jesus has
forever.
won. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that's like the behind the scenes thing they're trying to get across to the kids.
Maybe.
Jesus has a sash. He must have won something.
Yeah.
He's worth listening to.
Sorry, Joel, explain Twitch to me.
Twitch? Well, let's first of all, this AI bot is just supposedly Jesus answering questions that people type in and he answers it, which watching it, people have just tried to get it to say rude things.
Right.
That's one of the things that I've noticed. But it seems to run.
Went wrong with that priest one that you were talking about last week?
Oh yeah, that's what it kind of plays into that. Father Justin.
Father Justin. No, it's now just Mr. Justin or something. It's,
that's right.
He got
Justin
he's a lay person. Yes, he's no longer ordained by the Catholic Church.
I remember seeing the pictures of him when he was Father Justin, and then he was no longer. He was just part of the.
Yeah, he's now got an open shirt, collared shirt.
Yeah, just looked like a bit of a trendy dad.
That's right.
Rather than a priest.
He's trendy dad Justin.
I just wonder why people, what's the necessity of creating an Ask Jesus AI bot?
Do we know who created it?
We could probably find out. I'm having a look here. It says, doesn't actually say definitively who has made it. But Jesus is there for 24 hours answering questions. If I turn this up.
Portrays helplessness, love, and unity, which aligns well with my teachings. As suggested by heroes like us, I encourage you to find inspiration in the values and acts of kindness that your favorite heroes represent, regardless of whether they are from Marvel, DC, or any other comic universe. It's always great.
So somebody said, "Can I follow the superheroes or something?"
Maybe.
What do you think about?
I haven't been able to find the question, but Twitch. I don't know a whole lot about Twitch. I should be clear on that. It's mainly a video streaming service, so you can just having it run 24/7, if you like, just like this bot is running 24/7. What I remember hearing a podcast on it once. It actually started from something called Justin.tv, which I believe one of the founders of that decided that they would stream like Big Brother style their house for weeks on end.
Right.
And
just because they,
because they thought that would be a good idea. So there was a lot of, I think it went, and then I think he got tired of that or something. Something didn't work properly. But the lessons they learned, eventually it turned into Justin.tv, which was then part of became an internet startup somehow through seed funding with Y Combinator, and then the owning company, or the company that was funding it, was called Twitch, and then it ended up being called Twitch. So Twitch.tv is kind of the internet address that it goes to.
Right.
It is used by a lot of gamers. Seems to be the primarily popular use, is that gamers will play games. They have to be good at it, obviously, but then they will stream that to other people that will watch it. Now, both of you just said that nothing could be more boring. However,
I didn't say boring. I just said I don't understand the design.
I think I said boring.
Yeah,
I'm happy to own that.
Tim was happy with boring.
Well,
I wouldn't even go to like boring. I'm like, but why?
Well, that's the thing, is that's what I used to think too, but now I do it. There's an interesting thing between Twitch streamers, and some people refuse to stream on Twitch, their gaming, and do it on YouTube instead. So there's a bit of a thing in between YouTube and Twitch.
What's it based on?
It could be perhaps the creator model in terms of like how you get paid, but I'm not certain for how that actually works. Or sometimes just people just learn how to use YouTube first rather than Twitch, and vice versa. So I end up watching, the one that I probably watch the most is people playing car racing games.
And are they games that you play?
Well, no, I don't have. No, so that's the interesting. I don't have the ability to play them, because these are guys that are on racing sim rigs that they've got at home. Like, it has
so it's not like a video game that anybody could buy at the shop and play.
It is, but I can't. So there's one of the most popular, like most realistic racing simulator, widely accessible game is called iRacing, and so a lot of people play that, and it's very realistic. So if you actually have an accident, you're out of the race. Like, if the damage is very realistic. So the stakes are a lot higher. It's online only. You can't play it at home. You can only play via a server. And so people will stream themselves on that. There's another game called Assetto Corsa, and other people play other games. But I've also watched, I don't mind if I said this in the last episode. No, I don't think I did. There was the latest Call of Duty game that came out called Modern Warfare. It would look so realistic and so much fun that I watched someone recorded their playthrough from the very beginning to the very end, 6 hours long. I watched the whole thing. Not in 6 hours straight, but in about 5 or 6 days, I watched the entire thing because I found it so fascinating. So, but you don't have the. Did you guys grow up really with video game consoles as the thing, or was it not so much?
Oh, yeah, they were. I mean, like, my gosh, when I was a kid, like, I was really excited to go to my cousins' places and play with their Atari.
Oh, Atari.
Yeah,
wow.
Like literally Pong. Like little, that was the first game I remember. And then we had Pac-Man, we loved it. And we had Game & Watches. So I remember, like, the equivalent of a kid now being on their phone all day long. And I suppose in the middle it was like Nintendo DSs and all those sorts of things like that. When I was it was a little thing called a Game & Watch.
Mm-hmm.
Donkey Kong came from that. So so before Mario, that would have
been Nintendo,
yeah. But it was actually, so I had the Donkey Kong one, which is a double screen one, which, like, my cousins had a lot more of that sort of tech stuff than we did, but I got a lot of kudos for having the double screen.
Nice.
Open it up, it's like, ooh,
yes,
very exciting. So I mean, I used to spend, I don't know, I feel like I spent a lot of time playing Donkey Kong and Parachute and Turtle Jump and all these ones that they had. So definitely it was part of my growing up.
I feel like we could find someone on YouTube playing those games for you to watch.
And then when I was a bit older, got into like the some of the like Prince of Persia, and then and Myst. I loved Myst. That was really cool.
Oh, that was a massive technological breakthrough.
That's why I loved it. I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But then I think I just decided to do other things with my time.
Yeah.
No offense meant. I don't know. I don't get so with the racing one.
Yep.
Do you know why? Because you might not have even thought about this, but if there is actually an actual race and footage of an actual race you can watch, why would you choose to watch somebody playing a game of a race that's really realistic? That's what I don't get.
And I have wondered about that. I think it's aspirationally, that's what I'd like to be doing, but I can't. So that's why I watch it.
Okay, so there's barriers to watching the racing stuff because it's not
because
accessible?
a proper sim rig will probably cost you at least.
No, sorry, I don't mean you playing the game. Like watching somebody playing a game where they are racing, why wouldn't you watch an actual Formula One driver racing?
Well, I do both, but
I know you do, and you've got an interest in it. So that's why I'm why wouldn't you just spend I'm sure there's races you haven't seen. Why wouldn't you spend more time watching those races than that one? I don't get the difference or the attraction when the other option is there.
I wonder if it's because it seems more accessible. So I can't become a racing driver unless I started very young, but I can see people doing it that are actually very good at it. That's the other thing.
Okay.
I think the thing with streamers is that you watch it because you're like, I wish I could be as good as this person and dedicate as much time to playing video games as this person has.
Yeah.
And you can see how good they are.
Yep.
I think that might be part of it too. But also the other thing, I think there's an element of the streamer in particular, and the one that I think about the most is a guy called Jimmy Broadbent, who is basically started from...
Jimmy Broadbent.
That's his name. And
is there an actor, James Broadbent? I think there is.
I don't know.
That's
He's
probably
not an
why
actor.
he goes by Jimmy.
He basically started doing videos from his... He used to live in a shed out the back of his mum and dad's house. He unfortunately had a marriage breakup and then was in the shed at the back of his house. And you can see in his older videos, this is when I started getting onto him, his bed is in the background or to the side. And he just has his bed and the sim rig, and that's it. And that's what he'd been doing. And that's what he's become a full-time YouTuber. He now does real life car racing as well. And is now competing in what they call the Nürburgring 24 hours this year, which is really, really cool. But yeah, I think it's kind of like, it's just a bit more accessible. You can watch. And the other thing I was going to say, is the streamers have to be entertaining. So there's this extra element of being really good at the game, but interacting with the people that are on the chat.
Oh, so you're not simply just watching them play.
No, they will interact with people on the chat and stuff like that too. So I think there's this extra element of like, there's a personality that is linked to.
It's got
them.
reality TV elements as well.
Kind of. I think it's more authentic than reality TV almost, because you're like, I could be like this guy. Like there's a. So
there's not the producers creating the persona, but the person is still
their authentic persona. Their persona there feels more authentic than watching a produced TV show. Yes, but I think there must be something in terms of, I want to be like this guy. I relate to this person. He's really into motor racing as I am. Oh, but look at him. He's doing a really good job on this simulated game. I don't know. I don't know why. I mean, I've only really got into the last 3 years. I mean, streaming's been a big thing prior to that, but it's also a huge industry now. Like the video game industry is incredibly massive. Tim, got any thoughts on streaming? You've been planning?
You haven't convinced me.
Not going to go out and sign up to what's it called?
Twitch. I was going to say Twitch. No, what fascinates me is the disincarnate reality of being, firstly, being in video games. And I was going to ask the same question as Fee. I think that there's a difference between, obviously there's a difference between playing a racing game and being a racer. But I wonder, even if the step removed, there's a difference in watching a video game player versus watching a real race. And there's something about the like you say, you made the comment that if you make an accident in these racing sims, that it's not like Mario Kart where you just you pop back up again.
The cloud brings you back onto the track.
Just keep on going. So there is risk there, but it's not real risk.
Yes, I think you're right.
And I think that there's something missing about the fact that there's not real risk here. Whereas you watch the Formula One. I know you guys talked a couple of weeks ago about what was it? The
Senna. Yep, the San Marino Grand Prix.
Yeah, San Marino. 94. Where not just real risk, but two people died. There were other accidents there. just devastating. But there's real heightened actual embodied risk in there. And I just think that there's something, again, coming back to sort of a theological anthropology, like who God has made us to be as humans, that there's something about this further stepping back of incarnate experiences, of real life embodied kind of experiences that I think makes us less human. And so even engaging in these levels, I wonder whether there's something that is less, because we're less embodied when we do these kind of virtual things than doing real things, it will trigger some parts of our psychology and our brain chemistry to play a game and feel the risk and win and lose and those kinds of things. And that's not trivial. But because it lacks a full-bodied experience, whether we're actually therefore not really living into the created world in the best way possible, and we are somehow less human because of our engagement in more virtual things. And just earlier this morning, for you mentioning Ready Player One.
Yes.
And so this idea of like being in the digital world, in the virtual world, and for those of us who are a decade older than that, again, like the Matrix kind of idea, like whether you would choose to be in the Matrix, and then you've got that character in the Matrix who is choosing to be plugged back in, and this idea that actually the painful reality of an embodied existence, he figures is worse than choosing to go into a virtual world that he knows is not real.
Oh, yeah, that raises a whole bunch of stuff, doesn't it?
Yeah. And so like I can't remember who the character is, but he's the villain, I suppose, in that first Matrix movie, because he's trying to sabotage the whole enterprise because he wants to be fooled, like he wants to live in the reality that's not real, because the real reality is so hard and painful and worth slogging and hardship. So he will knowingly go back into the Matrix and want to be plugged back in. I just think there's a temptation there. I mean, we might have talked about this a couple of weeks ago, but that difference between just because something is easier doesn't make it better.
Yeah.
And the virtual world is easier, and as you even just said then, it's more accessible perhaps to think of yourself in a racing sim. But does that mean it's not necessarily better, therefore, for us as who God has created us to be? So they're the kind of the questions that I'm rolling around in my head as we think about this digital age and the digital world is what does it mean to be fully human, and for all of the good that the digital world brings us, whether a full embrace of that makes us in some way less human.
That's really interesting, because you were saying that taking the risk out, it's the same even with shooting games, isn't it? Like watching
that's where my brain went straight away, because you mentioned Call of Duty. I'm like, oh.
You're not really going to die, are you?
Yeah.
Yes.
But even,
and because people talk about enjoying that, I'm like,
I don't don't usually like shooting games. That's why I was really struck by the fact that I wanted to watch that whole thing.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it was because maybe it took out some of those things that make you uncomfortable when it is the real human experience. Possibly. I don't know.
What playing Call of Duty versus taking a few mates out and playing paintball, like, again, it's not risk as in life and death risk, but there's real hurt. There's real embodied experience.
That's why I've chosen not to do it. I saw the bruises long before I had the option. I said, no, thank you.
But there's something thrilling about that, about being there and being hurt, like having the full embodied experience that I think is probably tapping the same thing as playing a shooting video game or a war-based video game. But there's something more embodied about it that incorporates our full being, which therefore would heighten it even more and make it more real in a sense.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I think one of the reasons, because I don't like, there's some older World War II games that I enjoy and that I have played before, but Call of Duty was modern, but it felt realistic, whereas a lot of Call of Duty games that I've experienced is that I think it's way too fast and way too unrealistic. So I think that was what the appeal to it was. It's like, oh, this feels like it's more realistic. But again, this is why I like movies like Saving Private Ryan and other things. I really enjoy learning about World War II in particular. But there's the element of I'm not part of that, isn't it? It's the
distance.
The distance from it. But I want it to be as realistic as possible. But I don't have to experience what those people actually experienced was the sacrifice and the pain and the hurt and everything that is associated with war. I don't have to experience that. And I'm not trying to glorify war either, but I think there's also an appeal of trying to understand what was required by those people that actually fought for us and fought for the freedoms that we have now, that we get to watch other people play video games. So do you think, guys, it's a form of escapism that is perhaps taking us too far away from the reality of life?
Oh. I mean, it now is the reality of so many people. I mean, like reading a book is a form of escapism.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not the domain of video games or watching people on Twitch playing a video game. Like, we're just continuing in that path.
Is there a Twitch version where you can watch other people read?
I was just going to say, like, just sit there reading, or are they reading in their head or reading out loud?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know.
I'm a big fan of audiobooks. So
yeah, I was going to say, isn't that what an audiobook is? Just listening to someone read to you? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that is interesting. I don't particularly enjoy audiobooks.
You recently just kind of got into even podcasts, haven't you?
I'm trying. I found a couple that I can do. I just lose concentration anyway. But yeah, no, the I don't know. I feel like I don't know. I know people who love audiobooks, but I think what a lot of people do with audiobooks is they create like you guys were saying last week about, new technology is supposed to give us free time, but we actually just fill our time and get busier.
Yes.
Like for me, reading a book is like, I've actually got some time that I'm going to sit and read a book. I can't do anything else while I'm reading a book. I mean, I don't know could you multitask while reading a book, like an actual physical book?
I have actually seen people reading a book while they're walking. I'm like, that's impossible.
Oh, okay.
How can you do that?
I suppose you can be travelling on a train and reading a book. So that's a multitask of some sort, but not really. Yeah. But an audiobook, yes, you can multitask. And I think I've never been able to but with a podcast, I'm finding, especially if it's more documentary style, and like if I miss a bit, that's okay. Whereas if I'm multitasking and reading an audiobook and I miss a bit, I want to rewind it.
Yeah.
And it goes right back to when I was at Bible college, I was at Burwood at SMBC. It was half an hour journey, and people would go, I think I might have talked about this on one of my chip lunches potentially. It was about the time of a sermon, and that was when people would like put the sermon on a tape, and I had a tape player in my car, and I thought I'm going to be a good Christian, and I won't listen to the radio. I'll put a sermon on the way to college, but I would be driving along and I'd just completely tune out, and suddenly I would tune back in, and I was like, oh, I don't know how long it is since I actually listened to this. And I think actually, interestingly, part of me being able to do that is that I was a massive reader as a child, so I could sit in a room, and generally it would be like in a situation where there was a lot of adults, and nowadays a kid would be on a phone or on a screen. My version of that as a child, when I was in a space where there was nothing sort of catering for me, was I would have my book. I'd be sitting in the corner reading my book, and there'd be all this stuff going on, and I'd be able to read my book. So I think I've somehow through practice trained my brain to be able to tune out. But then I was tuning out the thing that I was supposed to be listening to. Yeah. So I stopped doing that because it was so frustrating, because it's one thing to skip back listening on your phone. If you're driving a car with a tape player, trying to rewind the tape player, not really safe driving practice. Yep. So I stopped doing that. But so depending on what it is, but I still can't do audiobooks.
I struggle with that. I actually can do audiobooks fiction, but not non-fiction. Non-fiction, I'm like, I feel like I'm going to miss the point.
See, I'd be more like that with the fiction, because I want to appreciate. I don't want to miss the story. Because I don't know, everybody's different. But so we've sort of gotten a bit off that.
Oh, that's right.
You're saying is it
the escapism.
Coming I don't. Yeah, I think it is escapism. I think there's a place for it, but like everything can be a distraction.
What kind of version of escapism is it? What kind of level is it?
Well, I think, trying to think theologically, I think there's a difference between escapism and rest.
Yes.
okay.
So I think that's kind of a tension in my mind is we are not meant to have to escape from our lives. So if you feel overwhelmed, that you feel you need to escape from something, and I know people use this colloquially, so it's not necessarily what they mean, but if we feel that we have to escape from our lives, it's probably a signal that something else is going wrong. But there is appropriate rest. Like God gives us rest and in seasons, and one day in 7, but also throughout the year and throughout the day and all these kinds of things. So it might be that for some people, an appropriate amount of video playing might be a way in which they are able to rest. In that it can, take the mental load off the day. It might be a social thing, or it might be an introvert thing, just to sort of refuel yourself so that you can better engage with your world and your work and your relationships. And it might be a way in which you are able to engage in these things so that it does what rest is meant to do, which is, partly to refuel you and restore you for life in God's world. And so I think that's the tension, is that if we're using it to escape from reality, well then I think that's a problem, and there are actually probably deeper things that we need to think about in the way that we have structured our lives and our work and our busyness and our relationships, if we feel we have to escape from those things. But appropriate rest. Now, again, that's going to be personality, it might be generational. I don't find video games particularly restorative. Like, it's not something that I would do to sit and, feel restored in order to, then better engage with my work relationships, with the life that God has given me. But that's not to say that other people won't find that to be helpful in that way. So I think that's the pushback I would think of is, the escapism piece, and whether it's ever right to have escapism, and think about, those kinds of tensions in our life.
I was thinking about how you were saying, in terms of, is it escapism or is it rest? And kind of relating that to Tim and you and I have talked about before, just like productivity and how do we do that well, and is it a good thing to focus so much on it, and those kind of things. And related to productivity is obviously procrastination. And there's a YouTuber I like, and I've mentioned him before, Ali Abdaal, and he talks about productivity a lot. But the one thing I've learned from him recently very much is that procrastination is often an emotional issue. You've got some kind of thing that you're unhappy about or unsettled about, and you need to understand what that is, and that will usually help you not procrastinate as much. But then I was thinking in relation to that I don't play video games anymore except a couple of games of Mario Kart with my kids every so often, because I just don't have the time to do it. But I was thinking back at the times when I would want to play it a lot. I think one of the reasons that I liked video games so much is because it was a way to be productive.
Interesting.
And I was talking about that kind of emotional, maybe escapism thing. It was like, if I do this, I know there's some version that I will build or produce or do something that's lacking in other areas of my life.
So you're able to learn the game, get better at the game. Is that the productivity?
Yeah, so think about a game that I used to play a lot was Football Manager, which is where you are a manager and you do the transfers and find and then
you end up getting a good team.
Or you work on getting a better team. Or you think about, there's like platform games like back in the day, Crash Bandicoot and things like that. There's those kind of games. But then also racing games is like, if I get better at taking a different line or getting better at this circuit, then I'll be able to win.
But the thing that, I don't know.
Go on, you can push back.
There's the thing that you're getting better at. What is its value?
Right. And that's where I'm probably going with that.
Yeah.
Is that, what is that value and what is that producing? And is it contributing to something? Is it contributing to the world? Not really. Yeah. And it speaks to a lot of things that we've been talking about in the last few podcasts about individualism and comfort, is that even in that productive, the desire for productivity is more individualistic when I'm not getting it in other areas. So I feel, and this could be to my detriment, of that to serve myself, I need to be more productive somewhere so I can feel like I feel better about myself.
Yeah.
But then there's the video game presents an individualized way of doing that.
And does it ultimately, like, in the moment maybe feel better. And I suppose if you can go on Twitch and create a channel and monetize your game play, I don't know what they're doing.
build a community around it.
Yeah. You would feel like you had achieved. I don't know.
So that's where the element is interesting, is that maybe there is a subset of that of like, well, I'm playing video games and I'm individualizing it in a sense, but I'm also bringing people into it with me and doing it with me. But it's a display of individualism if you're playing the video game on your own.
Yeah. I don't know.
I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
No, I know you're not, and that's why I'm trying to think of, I don't want to miss something that's there, but I can't see what's there.
Yeah, that's a really good way of saying it.
Yeah, I can't. I'm the best player of Call of Duty, Mario Kart. I'm like, so.
I mean, the most popular.
That just means you've spent a lot of hours of your life getting better at that. Now, we've all got things that we do to procrastinate, perhaps escapism, perhaps, but that's a lot. And I think the fact, like some other things that you could do, perhaps would be less immersive, and perhaps you would get less obsessive or even addicted to them because they don't offer that. That's a danger in my mind.
What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, I was trying to think of a quote. I can't find who said it, but one blogger's kind of paraphrased it. Our greatest fear should not be of failure, but of succeeding at the things in life that don't really matter.
Oh my gosh, Paul used that in a sermon.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
Maybe that's where
Recently.
I heard it.
Yeah. No. Paul said, because I got in a bit of trouble because in a number of conversations subsequent to that, I'm like, people were talking about stuff and I'm like, yeah, but if, I can't remember the wording, but it's basically if you, the definition of failure is to succeed in something that doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's that kind of thing.
And he used it in the context of I think it was a James sermon when we're doing the series on the book of James.
Okay. Maybe, yeah. That's probably where I've heard it most recently.
Yeah.
I've come across it a lot. But it's that kind of thing, like, yes, I could spend 70 hours and crack Donkey Kong, but succeeding in Donkey Kong, is that actually a measure of success? Holistically.
Or productivity we were talking about.
Exactly.
Have we been productive when we've,
Yeah. Or is it a sign of failure that we've actually dedicated those kind of hours to those kinds of things? And so I think that's it's those kind of wonderings that, who has God created us to be? And I don't want to fall into the trap of, like you joked before, the paraphrase of the perfect Christian, I have to use all of my travel time and listen to sermons or Christian music, and that's the only positive or only possible option available to a Christian. Like, that's definitely not the case.
Exactly.
But there are going to be choices in life about how we spend our time and what are things that are going to more holistically bring us to be the people who bring good, truth, beauty into the world, through what we do. Like a secular version of this, I talk about Cal Newport a lot because I listen to a lot of Cal Newport. But he talks about, I think it's in, I've forgotten the name of the book. Deep Work. It's in Deep Work. He talks about having high quality habits.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so it's this idea that, like if you have 2 hours where you need to switch off from doing work, good. Like you should actually switch off. You should not be doing work. And he's got things about how he never works more than 8 till 5. Like that's set. He never does more than that. But it means that you've now got 5 o'clock till whenever you go to bed. That's a lot of time. And for him, it's that every 5 days a week and then weekends. And unless you have high quality hobbies to fill that time with, you fritter it away.
Yeah.
So you could have spent 2 hours just trolling X or Facebook or YouTube or watching someone else play sport on Twitch, or you could have done something that actually was not only not productive necessarily in to produce something, but in something that was more life-giving. more restorative. And I think that's the tension from a Christian point of view that I'm trying to wrestle with is what are those things that are actually restorative?
And as somebody who's not a big gamer and I'm not a big gamer, that doesn't seem restorative perhaps. And you gave that helpful qualification before. For some people, there might be something valuable in that, and I can't say definitively about that unless I went and studied it carefully or what have you. But but finding those things. Yeah.
So I think that kind of plays in my mind as well is what is that use of that time that is not productive, because we always have to be productive. And I think this is, again, Cal Newport has a good critique of the over-productivity gurus that are always striving for, you want to be productive so you can cram more in. His version is you want to be more productive so that you can actually live the life that you want to live, however you best define that. Now, we would overlay anything that Cal says with a Christian worldview, which says, well, it's to bring glory to God and to live peaceably among our neighbours and all of those, however we define that. So what are those things? What are those things that are going to bring glory to God, that are going to help communicate, Jesus to my friends, my relationships, all of those kinds of things? What are those tasks? And I think what we'd find is that those are more restorative for us because it's how God has made us to be. And so we actually find that it's not just spending energy in the pursuit of productivity, but it is actually restorative and good for who we are as embodied people.
Yeah, I think so. I think
a little tiny example of that was the what happened with the friendship tailor beads.
Right. Yeah.
Where it's there's nothing ultimately very productive about sitting and making beads. But I saw people initially, we're going to do these because we're going to take them to tailor, and then people enjoyed the act of doing them. People were making them for each other as well. So even in the Taylor Swift beads, they were, I'll make this for this person, I'll make this for that person. And then people started making other ones. And so I've gone back to wearing beads that I didn't wear forever because one of them's from the one festival that we went to last year, and somebody made a whole bunch of them and said, let's all wear these at the one festival. I'm like, that's cool, let's do that. That's got the colours on it. Then I've got a Bible verse one that one of the girls made for me. I've got another Jesus bead one, my most recent acquisition that Jem made for me. It's the Jesus beads in colours, in flowers, which is super cute. And she just went, I saw this for you and I thought you'd add it to your Jesus bead collection. So she's noticed when she looks at my friendship beads that a lot of them are based around the colours of life, the Jesus beads. So I'm like, that's cool. I'm glad that that's something you thought I would like. I do like it. But like, making a friendship bracelet for someone is not productive potentially, but there's a value in it, and there's a thinking of another person, there's a love sharing. Just on that little level, it's like, oh, what a cool thing. So when the girls bring boxes of beads along to late night on a Saturday, I'm like, I'll sit with you. And even sometimes you sit there and you're like, you're not feeling inspired, so you're not even making beads, but you're just having that time together.
Yep.
But it's like a little hobby that is becoming, it's got a wholesomeness to it, a value to it.
And it's incarnate.
Yes.
And you have a physical artefact afterwards. And I think those things, we shouldn't underestimate those things as well. That again, this whole idea of, a theological anthropology, that God has made us to be embodied beings in his physical world, that those, therefore, physical artefacts have value. I think that's significant as well.
On that note, I'm going to have to go to my previous engagement.
Yeah,
sorry,
no
guys. Yes, I enjoy the rest of the podcast.
Thanks, Fee.
You too.
I'll do my early one way.
Okay, see ya. So, Tim, the thing, I'm glad you brought this up, because I was actually thinking before, while Phil was talking earlier, I actually was thinking, yes, what is a good version of productivity, or a good version of working hard at something? Because I'm reading a book called, I've talked about it before, Mastery, and it's one of my favourite books I've ever read by, again, one of my favourite writers, Robert Greene. Robert Greene. And I love the way that he takes stories of actual real life people doing things to illustrate his points in his book. A couple of examples of that would be a guy called Cesar Rodriguez, who was a fighter pilot, wasn't as skilled or talented as some of the pilots in the program that he was in, but then ended up becoming the best because he dedicated so much more time and effort to learning and getting better at it. And he was supposedly considered the last great fighter ace for example, because of the engagements he had during the Gulf War in the 90s, and another, it might have been the Balkans conflict, I think. But then there's another one called Freddie Roach, who was a boxing coach, and he coached guys like Manny Pacquiao, but he realised that he was having the same results that he would have when he was a boxer, that his coach would tell him all this, work really hard on being prepared for the fight, and then he'd get in the emotions of the fight and just start trying to punch his way to a win rather than following the strategy they decided to develop prior to the fight. And then he was the one that really popularized the mitt work with boxing, but then also started doing video analysis of fighters and trying to replicate it as much as possible, so that when fighters felt like the emotion was overcoming them, they would return back to, no, this is what the strategy, we're going to stick to this. So he had much more success with fights. The last example I'll bring out is Leonardo da Vinci, who, as we know, eventually created the flying machine and all those kind of things. But goes back to all the start when he was an amazing artist, when he was a young, illegitimate son of a 14-year-old, and an area that he could go into was art, and he had to impress, what do they call them, patrons, and be able to actually make money that way. So what I'm interested in is that how is getting really good at mastering a video game and perhaps contributing to a community, how is that different to those kind of examples that I mentioned, do you think? Because again, that book Mastery is talking about, we're all created with mirror neurons, so we need to go through an apprenticeship of learning how to do something and spending. There's always the 10,000 hour rule from Malcolm Gladwell, for example, but that masters of their craft have spent 10, 20, 30,000 hours on what they're actually doing. I feel like there's an element in there that God has created us to be like that, but is it perhaps taking it too far? So how is that what someone's doing on Twitch different from that? And you alluded to it already with like it's incarnate. There's also a physical artifact, but I'd love to tease that out a bit more if you've got any points on that. Yeah,
well, I think, to go right back to the beginning, good place to start.
Genesis.
Yeah. God says to Adam and Eve when he makes them, he makes humans, and he says, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and govern it, reign over the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and all the animals that scurry along the ground. So we have this mandate from God to be, productive in that sense. Now that is, it's productive as in generationally productive, so go and have children. But actually it's also this whole idea of, governing the earth, of reigning over. And so we have this mandate to be working towards the good of God's creation. So we are co-workers with God in that. And so I'm trying to think of the distinctions now. So theologians talk about there's the created, the uncreated and decreated, something like that. Oh, that's not quite right. But essentially the thing is there's the things that God have made. There's the way that sin corrupts what God has made.
Okay.
But then there is also things that are yet unmade, or that are yet brought into the way that God has best want them to do.
Yep.
So there's this mandate to go out and continue in the creational process that God has set in motion. And part of being God's image bearers on the earth is to image him to creation. And so when creation looks at us and when we look at each other, we ought to see that here is a creative God who has set himself up in the world through us. And we are to engage in that process. And so work is good.
Right.
And so, we talk about, God made us to, he says to Adam and Eve, work 6 days on the seventh day, you are to rest. And so often we take that as like, we need to make sure we have a day off and, rest well, which is absolutely true. But the flip side of that is that 6 days of work is good. 6 days of productivity, of engaging with God's word world through the means that he has given us to generate and continue to bring into mastery, I suppose you could say, like bring into order. That's it. It's order, disorder, and unorder.
Okay.
Yes, I think that's right. So there are things that are ordered, so God has set in place. There is disorder because of sin.
Yep.
And then there's the things that are unordered. So God chose not to do all that he could have done and order all that he could have. There is stuff that we are called into the world to continue to order. So we are bringing order to chaos. And so we continue to order the unordered as we engage in the world. Now that might be bringing beauty through art. It might be through the construction and better design of this and working out more efficient ways of building, this thing that is useful for human flourishing but uses less physical resources or, achieves a better end or those kinds of things. And so when we are bringing order to that which is unordered, I think that is where we start to get this idea of a Christian productivity, that we're actually engaging well with the world. So, classic example, the discovery of penicillin and the ability to translate learning about this penicillin into medicine that can help heal people, is one of the most, revolutionary medical breakthroughs that we have. And so you have this idea that, we are bringing order to chaos by being able to manipulate God's creation into a new ordering of, the biochemical, whatever it is that's going on. I don't really understand penicillin, but in order to help the flourishing of God's people. And so I think that's part of this process. So Ros and I were watching recently The Artful Dodger on Disney Plus.
Oh, yes.
Which is about the character from Oliver Twist, the Artful Dodger, who ends up through a series of events ending up in Sydney. And so he's there, and it's like early English colony time. And because of the circumstances that brought him there, he's now a surgeon. And so he's there, and he gets into a romantic relationship with the governor's daughter, who's also defying authority by being interested in medicine, and the scoffing of, how could a woman ever be a doctor? All this kind of so there's all this kind of play. But one of the medical things they talk about is she is playing around with the idea that you can actually knock someone out and make them unconscious while you do surgery on them, and then wake them up again.
Yep.
And so they're playing around in this kind of era of medical explosion of going, well, no one ever does that. So if you've got someone whose leg needs to come off, you just give them something to bite on, strap them down, 4 people hold them, and you can take the leg off.
Yeah. And
so warning, if you're going to watch this with your family, it can be a little bit, the medical scenes are a little bit full on.
Okay.
But it's the same sort of thing, like this, through the fictionalized story, this governor's daughter is bringing order to chaos. She is ordering the unordered by realising a medical advance in being able to put people to sleep through some sort of anaesthetic, and then being able to wake them up again so that they don't experience the pain of medical procedures. So that's all part of this as well. So I think that is kind of playing into what we're doing. So the question then is, is Leonardo da Vinci painting, the Last Supper, or inventing a flying machine or a tank or all those kind of things that he was doing, is that bringing order into chaos? Is it in alignment with God's created world? And likewise, is playing 6 hours of Donkey Kong on Twitch, or a step removed, logging onto Twitch and watching someone else play 6 hours of Donkey Kong, is that bringing order into chaos? Is that actually fulfilling this sort of cultural mandate that we have through Genesis to, reign over the creation, reign over the fish of the sea, continue to bring order into chaos, order from chaos, order the unordered, so that it even more fully represents God's design for this world? Is that what we're doing? Is that where we're headed? And so we have this biblical storyline of creation, fall, redemption. We're heading towards new creation. And a couple of authors have said it's kind of like a stage show where it's a 5-act play, and we've seen creation, we've seen fall, we've seen the Old Testament reality and the New Testament, where Jesus starts to bring order and restore all things. We know Act 5 because we've read Revelation. We know what God will do when he makes all things new. Here we are in Act 4, and we're largely improvising. So we don't have a direct script. I don't know exactly what there's no direct thing that God absolutely wants me to do in the next hour, or I'll be fired from the play. But the best improvisers are going to be those who know the first 3 acts and know the 5th act and play their part in line with that story. And so I think that's going to be a Christian productivity, is something in that line, that I am using my life in line with that story, having known what's come ahead, knowing what's gone before, knowing what's come ahead, and saying, okay, my life is in trajectory with this, and I am improvising as best as I can. I have the freedom to be an accountant or a astronaut or a marine biologist or whatever. Fighter pilot. There are lots of things that are in line with that trajectory. But I think a good use of our time and good productivity is going to be, furthering that story. And so that's where my question, and maybe, as you say, maybe the whole point is I'm not a gamer, and so it just doesn't resonate with me. Maybe that's what you take away from this episode. Yeah. But I do wonder whether there is those kinds of things, as Fee said, can easily become distracted. They can easily become addictive. And so many of them are designed to be addictive.
Yes.
So if the design is addiction, then it'll more than likely than not take us away from fully living into that storyline that we are being called into, creating order from unorder, pursuing the life that God wants us to live.
I was just, as you were saying that, and I love that, I think that's actually really, really prescient way of thinking about it, is that I wonder, and I spoke about how the accessibility to be able to watch streamers is what's, appealing to it. But I wonder if there's an idea that we like it because it's bypassing those things that you're talking about, the intended process of becoming something good is appealing to it, like it's a shortcut, rather than God's intended process was to, and relating to back to those masters in the book of mastery, is maybe we are looking to bypass those because we just want the end result, not what we've been created to be, to work in that. Is it the uncreated realm, or the not the disordered? It's the unordered. Sorry.
So there are things that are not yet ordered,
right? That
we have the opportunity to step into and order because of God's creational design.
And think about that element of deep work and how we talk about where our attention is split up into so many different bite-sized pieces now that we're not able often to return to that deep work state, which is where that kind of work I think really happens. And maybe that's what we're maybe heading towards, or in this discussion, is technology and digital progress is good, but not all of it is progress, good progress, as we said. So then if we're disrupting some of that unordered, that process of working through unordered things that God's put in our path by trying to find the shortcut. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to get to that?
Yeah, well, again, we know even just from the physical sciences and even the psychological sciences that hardship actually grows us.
Yes. So we're trying to skip that.
We're trying to skip that. We want the rewards without the work. And it's just not going to happen. There's no possibility where me sitting on the couch and watching Thor is going to make me anything like Chris Hemsworth. It's just not. So if I actually genuinely want the Chris Hemsworth body, then I'm going to have to put in the reps, and it's going to be hard, and it's going to tear my muscles, and it's going to be sore, and it's going to require a lot of effort, and it's going to require cutting out a lot of the foods that I would actually naturally gravitate towards.
I thought you were talking about your body. Goodness.
Sorry, cutting out my body.
I thought you cut part of your body out.
Well, I don't think so.
I think you'd have to shave a fair bit though.
Maybe.
To look like Chris.
Yeah, that's true. Yep. But we don't want that. We want and what a lot of the technology is providing for us is the appearance of
the illusion.
Achievement,
Yes.
the illusion of achievement
Yes.
without the work.
Yes.
And so it's, to come back to the fast food, slow food movement we talked about a couple of weeks ago, that, it's really easy to drive through McDonald's.
Yep.
Because it's in and out in 5 minutes.
And it's cheap.
And it's cheap. Well, kind of. It's pretty expensive. Bought Macca's the other day for me and Kyle. I was just like, seriously, $20? Far out. Cost of living crisis.
Your groceries, though, far more expensive.
Anyway. But so it's harder is going to a grocery store, buying quality, fresh produce, spending a couple of hours in the kitchen, putting that together, making a meal. One is a lot harder. Both end up with the same result in that we have, food in our belly. But we've shortcut one of those processes, and we're going to be a lot worse for it. And so, I think
a lot worse for it by shortcutting the process. Yeah, that's where I was trying to get, I think.
Yeah. So the digital world feeds us a lot of junk food, and the appearance of success and the appearance of satisfaction that we find, and even the appearance of achievement of having made it to the end of whatever that game was you watched.
Call of Duty.
Call of Duty. You make it to the end of Call of Duty, and you do psychologically feel success.
It was like watching a movie. That's what it was like.
Right. Yeah. And if you had played it, if you yourself had gone through however many hours it actually requires to play through the entire game, whether that's 6 or more hours, you do feel a sense of mastery over that. But was it a McDonald's mastery or was it a slow food mastery? And
I think you might be right.
And I wonder whether, and again, it comes back to my conviction of who I think God has made us to be, that the sense of mastery that we get in the digital world is going to be unfulfilling ultimately. And not to say that all digital is wrong, like I'm not a Luddite, but we fool ourselves into the gamification of digital technologies is going to be, we think it's fulfilling, but it's far less. Now, if you're a computer programmer, if you were the one who actually creating,
putting all the work,
Call of Duty, that's a massive effort. Like you are now, thinking you've got unordered, zeros and ones that you are ordering into this particular thing and making it beautiful and streamlined and engaging. So there is a certain mastery there in the creation of it. I just wonder whether the creation of digital artifacts versus the playing of digital artifacts there's a difference there. So those who are creating digital technologies, that's huge. That's a world I don't understand. Massively creative. That's amazing. But I think we're at the consumer end, then I think the sense of mastery is far less. So it gives us the imitation of that.
I think that's a great way to finish. But I think for next week, we can talk about we've talked about creating Christian cultural goods before. How do we create Christian cultural goods online?
Okay.
I think that's what we can do for next week. How's that sound?
Sounds great. Let's do that.
It's been fantastic to have you on as usual. Thank you, Tim. Always helping me think better, so thank you very much. Thank you to Fee, who was on here but is no longer on here, but she's off to a lunch. And thank you to everyone that's been listening, including
Greg,
thank you.
Thanks,
Sorry,
Greg.
I forgot your name, Greg, but thank you, Greg, for sending in that AI Jesus who gave us a bit of a laugh.
Yep. And if anyone wants to know what AI Jesus thinks, ask Jesus on Twitch.
Yeah, you can always ask him. Or you could just ask him through prayer. That might be a better way.
Yeah, that's right. You could go through the hard work of quiet and solitude and prayer.
There it is. I mean, that Twitch AI Jesus is bypassing prayer, isn't it? Thinking that it's
actual relationship with Jesus.
Yes. There you go. Great way to finish. But if you want to email me any more AI bots that are funny, you're welcome to at joel@shockwabsorber.com.au or anything else that we've talked about today. Thank you for joining us, whether it was via your podcast app or on YouTube. And we'll finish with a one way.
One way.
One way.